Welcome back to Cage Match, where we've been looking at places where our culture's ideas run up against God's ideas to try and show how the way of Christ is not just right because the Bible says so, but because it's beautiful and it makes sense. And today we're talking about sex. Specifically the question, as long as everyone consents and I'm not hurting anyone else, does it matter with whom and when I choose to have sex? Now, sex is one of those places where most of us carry around deep-seated misconceptions and pains. Whether it's a feeling that sex is dirty that was ingrained in you from the way your church talked about sex in your youth group, or maybe it's a feeling that you'll only be loved if you perform sexually for your partner. Or maybe it's that your sexuality has been said that it's the most important thing about you. Or that if you don't look a certain way, no one will see you as being a sexual person. The way we were raised, the messages that we hear from friends and social media influencers, and the images we see around us in media and advertising, and the deep impacts of pornography have all been shaping our culture's views on sex. And Christians, for the most part, are not exempt from the oftentimes hurtful impact of these messages. So, to help us think about how Jesus answers this question of why does it matter with whom and when I have sex, let's start by asking, what is sex? Our larger culture has a lot of different views on this, but for the most part, they can be categorized into two schools of thought. Many people think of sex like it's an appetite that needs to be met. Tim Keller explains this view on sex by saying, sex is thought of like eating or any other good and natural appetite. That means we should feel free to fulfill that appetite whenever we feel the need, and that there is no reason why we shouldn't sample a variety of cuisines and continually look for new taste sensations. To limit people's ability to satisfy their appetite would be as unhealthy as trying to keep them from eating. This is the view that says sex is only natural and normal, and as long as two people consent, there is no reason anything should stand in their way from fulfilling their desires in whatever way they see fit. If I have a sexual impulse, I should go for it. Now, the second common view in our larger culture is that sex is not just a physical act of pleasure, but it's also one of the most important ways we express our identity. We all have sexual desires, and the specifics of those desires and how we choose to express them is one of the deepest forms of self-expression. This view says that our sexuality defines us and the people we choose to have sex with and the types of sex we engage in and the reasons for sex tell the world something about who we are in our deepest being. Both of these views have one main thing in common. They paint sex in a very inward, self-oriented way. In sex, we may hope that the other person enjoys themselves as much as we do, but both of these perspectives on sex are ultimately self-focused. It's an appetite that I need to meet, and while you may benefit from it as well, my desire is to try and meet my needs. And if sex is one of the key ways I express who I am, while all willing parties may enjoy themselves in the process, it is still something that I am doing that places myself as the center of focus. In sex, I'm saying, this is who I am. Now, one of the ways this can be damaging is that it can lead to dehumanizing others. In the words of the philosopher Martin Buber, both of these views on sex can shape us so that we view the other people as its and not thous, as objects to be used rather than people to be loved. Objects to be used in my pursuit of pleasure, objects to be used in showing who I am. Now, I want to make sure I say this. The way the church has taught sex has not always been good, helpful, or right. And there are many people who are still working through the scars and shame that has come out of that. But regardless of how the church has taught sex, the biblical view on sex is so unique and beautiful because it's claiming that sex is more than just a physical appetite. And the Bible doesn't claim that sex isn't a part of our self-identity, but it's claiming that sex is more than just self-expression, and our identity is much more than just our sexual predilections. In short, the Bible portrays sex as a wonderful, physical celebration of an ever-growing emotional relationship. And it's the boundaries that the Bible places on sex that actually protect it and help it to be this beautiful way that our deep physical desires help us embrace oneness and emotional connection and security and commitment. Check out these 3 passages with me real quick to see what I mean. In Genesis chapter 2, we see God acknowledging that his first human creation, Adam, was not meant to be alone. So he creates Eve so the 2 of them can have each other. And God says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Now, 2 ideas are present here. The first is that in sex, the 2 become one. And the other is that in this original intention for sex, there was no shame felt between the 2 humans. Both of these ideas are trying to communicate that sex is more than just a physical action meant to make us feel good. It's about the joining of 2 people, the total sharing of each other. It is physical, but it's also about vulnerability and emotional connection and lasting commitment. 2 become one. They are joined together, and in bearing the entirety of themselves to the other, they feel no shame. It's meant to be an action that brings 2 committed people together in a way only possible through sex. And if you're ever wondering if the Christian view on sex is prudish or boring, just read Song of Solomon. I mean, in one of the tamer parts of the book, Solomon writes this. He says, "How beautiful you are, and how pleasing, my love, with all of your delights. Your stature is like that of a palm, and your breasts like clusters of fruit. I said, I will climb the palm tree, and I will take hold of its fruit." Like I said, that's actually one of the tamer parts of Song of Solomon. And what we see all throughout that book is a celebration of the physical delights of sex in its many, many forms. This means that the biblical view is that sex is a wonderful physical act to be deeply enjoyed, but one that is meant to be an expression of an ever-growing, deeply committed love relationship. That's why when Paul writes about the marriage relationship in Ephesians 5:31 and 32, he says that this 2 becoming one is meant to reflect Christ's love for the church. His idea is that in sex, we express love by giving ourselves to the other. You see, the constraints on sex that people tend to dislike about the biblical view are that they are there to protect us and to protect sex from the ways that our sinful nature tries to distort it. Because if I view sex just as an appetite and people as an object used to meet that appetite, I'll hurt them. And if I view sex as my primary means of self-expression, I will be placing too high an emphasis on how my sexuality shows who I am. And anytime someone questions it or disagrees with me, or even if I go through something that physically deprives me of it, I will be left hating those who have attacked my very identity or questioning who it is that I am. But if I strive after God's ideals for sex, it not only helps me in having deeply fulfilling relationships, but it protects me from the harm that sex without boundaries can have. I know talking about sex in a group setting can be a challenging situation, but my prayer for you today is that this time helps you better understand the good gift God has given us and how His constraints are actually good things. We'll see you soon.